So we are talking about how to use God's money wisely. We spent 8 weeks on this, going through a whole bunch of different things and how that looks practically. And we just want to do a little review. Why is it important to do all this for the glory of God? Why should we use our money in a way that pleases God? So Colossians 3:17 says, "And whatever you do in word or deed," and money would fall under deed, how you use your money, "do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him." Now, let's go to the Old Testament, Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 27 and 28. One of the principles we looked at for using our money. Remember, our money is not just for us. God did not just give it to us to use for our own purposes. But in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27, it says, "Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, Go, and come again, and tomorrow I give, when you have it with thee." So if someone comes to you with a need and you have the means to meet that need, you don't say, "Come back tomorrow, I'll help you," when you have it with you right there. In the same way, I think when it comes to using our money and giving it back to God, we should not say, "God, wait till next year and I'll give you the money that you want back from me." No, if you have it now, God expects you to give back to him now. And he expects us with what he's given us to use it wisely, not just tomorrow, but today. And let's look at Proverbs chapter 16, verse 8, just a few pages over. Another principle here that we talked about. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 8. "Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right." And you can probably think of people in your life or in this world who have a lot of money and they do not have good morals. Or you can think of people who have good morals, but they don't have much when it comes to earthly wealth. But that's okay, because that is better than having everything and doing what is wrong. So God expects us, no matter if we have a little or a lot, when it comes to wealth and possessions, to use it for his glory. Proverbs 11:3. Proverbs 11:3 and verse 3 and 4. "The integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them." Verse 4, "Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death." So money is not to be used as a way to save us, nor is it to be used as a way to protect yourself from the punishment of God upon your sin, in whatever that form may come. Riches are only to be used in this earth in a way that'll further God's purposes and further give him glory. In a moment, after Mr. Walkman comes, I'm going to ask you guys to share some ways that you have used money, saved money, invested money, whatever money, that you think would be helpful for others. So you may say, "You know what, 3 years ago I had to get a new car, and I found this was a really helpful place to go," or some wisdom that someone helped me, gave me when looking for a new vehicle that might be helpful to you. Or you may say, "You know what, I bank with this one bank who has been really good to me for whatever reason." Or you say, "You know what, I shop online a lot, and there's this one place that helps me save a lot of money when I buy things I need for my home." Okay? Anything. I want you to, or you say, "You know what, I used to have all these bills I had to pay off and all these debts, and there's this one thing I did or someone helped me with that really helped me get out of that and fix my problems with money." So think about what those may be, what you might share with everyone else. And we may have covered it already a couple months ago. We may not have. But while you're thinking about those, I'm going to ask Mr. Zwakman to come. And I told him he can have as much time as he wants to fill in any holes I may have missed when I was speaking, and anything else he can share that would be helpful to us tonight.
I'll try it with no guarantees. I found out about this, or was asked about it this afternoon. So I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. I used to do this as a living, helping people in their finances. And I just happen to remember some of it. Pastor spent 8 weeks doing this. I'm going to try and condense this into about 8 minutes. Listen close. He probably touched on a number of things, and I just don't remember them being done specifically, or maybe you didn't, but just didn't add to it. I got to say, you probably didn't know all this from experience, but I could tell that you studied and got a lot of information. Your information was reliable, was very good, and you were pretty thorough. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I made a couple of notes. But don't worry, we'll have you out here in no time. If I put on some glasses, I can study my notes. Now understand this, if I had to give somebody an elevator speech, this would be it. Very short and to the point. A couple of questions afterwards, if you like, would be fine, or even later on. So if we look at people today, money problems are now and have been for thousands of years an issue. They don't always have to be. Many of those issues happen because of what we do and what we don't know, what we do and what we don't do. So to make this quick, I'm going to point out how you can identify if you're having a little bit of a hard time financially. If your debt is high, this is how you can knock it down. Understand, two people can have the same amount of money coming into their household with basically the same fixed expenses, rent, utilities, da-da-da-da. But one after 20 years is sitting comfortably, and the other one is no better off than it was a month ago today. One of the things you have to identify if you're looking to turn your finances around is to do what we would call stop the bleeding. Where is this person's money going versus what that person is doing with their money? And this may sound overly simple, but it's highly effective. If you took a starting date of tomorrow and you said, for the next 30 days, I'm going to take and I'm going to itemize and write down every expense that I have. At the end of that 30 days, you stop and you look at what you did spend, and look at where you would have just thought you were spending it on necessities, and find how much of it isn't necessities, how much of it is waste, how much of it can be trimmed. If you want to itemize that into gas, entertainment, pizza, whoever said that, you were right, it's almost essential. But if you take and itemize it and do your own analysis, showing where it all goes, a picture starts to open up. And when you see where your money is going, turn off the leak. Cut it back, cut it out, stop it if you can. And then just stop and think, if you could eliminate $100 for 30 days, that's a little over $3 a day. You took that same $100 and you applied it to a credit card or some other debt. Over a year's time, after knocking off that nasty habit that cost you $3.33 a day, you can be $1,200 ahead on a principal balance. If you figure out that you're now not paying interest on that $1,200, The following year, you're going to have the $1,200 plus the saved interest that you can now, that hopefully you've paid off one credit card or one debt. You can take that same money and apply it to your next highest. We want to always start with the lowest debt first. It's called debt stacking. Eliminate the smallest debt, take all the money you were spending on that, put it on the second debt until that one is gone. Take what you were paying on that plus the first money, stack that onto the third one. You'll be out of your debt pretty quick. A lot of people would say, no, attack the higher interest rate first. Some degree of sense to that, but when I used to run the computer program on this, the computer program showed me exactly what I was being told, and that was disregard the interest rate, do the plan, and it worked. So how are we doing so far? Now, I had a personal experience with somebody who was living in a low-end apartment in Newport, mom, dad, and 2 kids. And he drove a vehicle that you always wondered if it was going to start the next day, it was going to go anywhere. But yet him and his wife together had a good income. It was just simply what they did with that. When they had to, when it was put on paper, these people were actually able to buy a house for over $200,000 by taking money that was being wasted and identifying that you do have it and put it in your house. It worked. They got out of that low-end apartment into their own home, and it was a decent home. It works. All right, so what else did we put here on the short notes? Another very interesting thing, maybe it doesn't apply to anybody here so much now, but maybe your children. I say that because most of you are probably well into your mortgages, maybe you're already through them. But one of the biggest hang-ups, one of the biggest problems people have is the mistakes they make in a mortgage. And I'll bet there's 2 answers I could get out of the audience here. If I asked, what 2 questions do you ask, or did you ask the last time you went and got a mortgage? Anybody, what 2 questions did you ask? Yep.
Well, I don't know if this would ask, but typically what you'd ask is, what's my interest rate and what's my payment?
Exactly. You heard this before, and I didn't tell you that. But that's exactly right. And people think that because I have a lower rate, or that my payment is lower, I'm saving money. Not always the case. When I was in the industry, we sold what we called a simple interest mortgage. And what that is like a car loan, where you only pay the interest on the balance that you have. As you pay off the car loan or whatever loan it is, you're paying on a lower balance. Mortgage interest is scheduled mortgage or scheduled interest. So it isn't what's my rate, what's my payment. The answer to the best mortgage is what's my cost? What's my cost over time? And you'll get an amortization schedule. On that schedule, it'll tell you when you first start out, here's your $200,000 mortgage. Your principal payment is this big, $15. The rest of your payment is primarily taxes, insurance, and interest. And over time, this one gets a little bit bigger and this one gets a little bit smaller. But the last figure you want to see is the end one, your total cost. It's easy to get tripped up that way. Anybody who's thinking about refinancing, you can get tripped up even faster there. Just recently, I've been hearing some radio ads saying, if you've owned your house for over a year now, you probably have equity in that house and you can borrow it. Some people, especially the ones in the industry, will tell you this is what the smart money does. Not telling you that if you've been in your mortgage for 5 years or 10 years, and then somebody comes along with a low interest rate, that's like bait on a fishing line. You want to bite at that, it makes sense. But just remember, if you do that, you'll start with the small principal payment all over. Look at the end cost. Make sure that amortization schedule is run. And then compare the cost from staying where you are to refinancing. You may find out that it isn't smart money. It's very bad money. And one of the big things, I had a personal experience with this, somebody who was having money problems, they decided to get a different mortgage on their house. And I said, let me look at it first. I think they were a bit reluctant, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you can get burned real fast. In these people's case, they had something called yield spread. Yeah, I knew the word earlier because I wrote it down here. Yeah, yield spread premium, there it is. In this particular case, the people had no extra money and they were going out after what they thought was a better mortgage, and I looked at it and I showed them where they were paying $11,000 more as a fee for the new loan. Smart money, somebody told them. I brought this to their attention. And as I remember, they didn't like this being pointed out to them. They had been taken, or were about to be. Yield spread premium is nothing more than the lender you went to, which these people said, I checked them out, which was probably, anybody know a place where I can get a new mortgage? And Joe over there says, yeah, I just went over to this guy there. They got me all set up. He says, okay, thanks. He checked it out. Yield spread premium, you won't notice it on the paperwork. Cost him $11,000, I think it was. All that is that mortgage broker found out you qualified for this interest rate, but the bank told him, if you can get his interest rate up, we'll give you this reward, which happened to be $11,000. So he lost twice. He lost by paying a higher rate, and he lost by paying the $11,000. This, in trying to get a better mortgage, which now another thing with refinancing, understand, you're not only starting your amortization schedule over a second time, but now you're taking your fees, all your fees, which can be thousands. In their person's case, I think it was 11,000 plus, and now you just added that to your debt, but that's okay because we just rolled it in. So now instead of coming out ahead, there's no way they'll ever be ahead. Just be careful. Don't take the first offer. If you go shopping for one, or a mortgage or a refi, if you decide that's really the best, which oftentimes it is not, make sure you know what you're doing. If you don't, call me and I'll refer you to somebody. Or maybe I'll even look at it myself if I can put my glasses back on. Another little thing, just to show where people sometimes mess up, is in the area of life insurance. You look at your mortgage, you look at your ability to earn income. Your mortgage, your home is going to be your most valuable single asset in most cases. But if you stop and look at it, the ability to buy and pay for that asset is worth more than the asset, because if you can't pay for it, you're not going to own it. Life insurance is important. You'll have most life insurance agents out there wanting to sell you a whole life policy. Be careful again, be very careful. I've got a neighbor. He's a nice guy. I went to help him out even though he's a staunch Democrat. And oftentimes doesn't make any sense. But I asked him one day when I was in the industry, is, what kind of insurance do you have? And sure, he had a whole life policy. Just one of the tricks of that is finding out whether or not your policy that builds a cash value, everybody assumes that that cash value is in addition to the face value. Buy a $100,000 life insurance policy and you pay on it 50 years, it's supposed to be worth, $150,000 or $380 million, depending on your agent. When oftentimes the policy you get, and in the case of my neighbor, he found out to be it was true, that all that cash value that you think is yours, if you read the fine print, it is there until you die. Then it disappears. Then you get the face value. So watch that carefully. Unless you know how to read the policy or had your honest agent actually explain it to you, don't count on it being there. And one odd thing about that cash value that you see in a policy, I always thought it was strange, still think it's strange, but you can have that money. If you take and borrow your money, that cash value, they will send you a check if you pay them interest on your money. It doesn't make sense to me, but people do it all the time. Okay, I probably burned up about 8.5 minutes, just touching on a few things there. Any questions quickly? Because I see Joshua's ready to come back up here. Yes.
I'm hearing a lot about these reverse mortgages. What do you think of that? I don't know much about it, but apparently you borrow on your home and you can still live there. Is that it? You know much about it?
Okay, this is going to depend a lot on the person. If you are a person who has no children, has no place to leave your homestead to, you don't care where it goes, and you want to stay in your house and maybe even take a vacation, you can take the equity of your house, you can pay them a lot of money to borrow your equity. You don't ever have to pay it back, but personal experience from one I knew of recently, reverse mortgage taken out years ago, maybe $115,000, and understand that you don't pay anything on that if you don't want to, and most people don't. But that interest is charged to you just as if you were paying it back. So $115,000, let's just say you borrowed that much, you can get to the point where the interest, the principal balance due is what you borrowed, plus the interest on that, plus now you have a higher payment every month that you don't pay, but since there's principal and interest now due, next month's interest is probably including that principal and that interest, and that just skyrockets to the point where over a period of time, you will have a right to live in your house because the contract will say as long as you live there and maintain it, have the taxes, insurance, you can live there. But your equity will eventually be eaten up to the point where you can no longer sell it because you are what they call underwater. So if you had children, you think, okay, I'm going to give them the house. I've got this $115,000 reverse mortgage on it. You may come up with a very unpleasant surprise that says, no, the balance due on it is $20,000 more than the house is worth. But if you're that person who says, I need the money, or I don't want to live over there, I don't have anybody to leave my property to, and you want it, that's up to you. But as a financial move, it is generally not going to work so good. Some cases will be different. Okay, that was one. Did I explain all of life that fast? Okay, the most important part, and when I asked Marla here, when I was putting this together in 9 minutes for an 8.5-minute talk, she says, I asked her, did I miss anything here, or what should I put down? And she said, and I'll give her credit for this because she was right. She says, the most important financial move you can make is to give God what he has coming. Do it with the understanding that God can do whatever he wants. He could take your money, or he could take something else of yours. He doesn't need your money. But what he does want is your obedience. And so if you've ever gone through life and all of a sudden that unexpected good thing happens, I credit that to God's grace, God's blessing, that he's going to give to the people who trust him for it and obey him for it. As the Bible says, the cup running over. I don't believe that happens to everybody who says, Lord, I'm a little bit short this month, as I have been for the last 20 years. You cannot outgive God, because he can take it from Blake over there, because he's got extra. I can tell he's got extra, because everybody in this world wears white tennis shoes, and he comes in with these probably because he got them on sale. They're orange. They had to be cheap. Nobody else would buy them. So God can get his money where he needs it, but the blessing comes from obedience to him. You cannot outgive him. Yes, Jesse. Yeah. If you can get it, there's a lot of variables here. If you've had your mortgage a long time and you're to the point down the scale where you're paying this much principal on a payment that much, you may be past the point of that benefiting you. That's a variable. The other part about this is, I'll bet if every one of you went out and amongst all of you, you contacted 100 mortgage lenders tomorrow, you will find no more than one that's ever even heard of it. It was very, very rare. My company was the only one I knew of that did it. I even called into a real estate show I used to call into on the radio once in a while, and they didn't know about it. So if you could get it, highly beneficial, save a lot of money. And then one other important thing is if, you know how when you get a mortgage, the bank says, congratulations, we understand you have some moving expenses. You don't have to pay us next month's payment. They always give you that 1 month. Do you realize that if you said, no, I got my people from church to help me move in, here's your first month's payment. If you make that one payment, you can sometimes decrease your entire mortgage by 1 year. You're going back to now paying that one payment, let's say it's $1,200, that goes directly to the principal that is this big. And if you follow the amortization schedule out to where it gets big enough that it's $1,200, you've gone a long way down the line. Same thing with the refi. If you do that, make that first payment or make a payment, you probably won't even get a book for it because it's not scheduled for that. The bank knows that. The bank also knows that if you make that first payment, they're going to lose a lot of money. So what was your question? Oh, yeah, got a little off it there, but yeah. Probably impossible now, being as I think the company that I was involved with doesn't even offer them anymore. But even bankers who sold mortgages didn't know what it was. I could sell them, and did, but probably not even anymore. Okay. Anybody else? Where did you buy your shoes?
Run for fun.
Yeah, if I had those, I'd be running too. For a can of black spray paint. Okay, well, fine. Thanks, folks.
All right, that was really good. Thank you. Is there anyone else, now that you've had some time to think, who would like to share some things that you think could be helpful to someone else when it comes to money? Yes, Blake. You can just stand where you are, and actually, yeah, why don't you come up here real quick, and that way it's on the recording.
You have to stay next to me, I can pull the microphone. I'll make it short and quick here. First of all, Dan, thank you so much for that. That was really helpful. You said a lot of good things there. I learned several things from you today. Thank you. One thing about money, sure, it's always there. People always hear the word, it makes the world go around, right? So emergency savings. It's just that make sure, and you hear a rule of thumb or two and how much money you should have for emergency savings. So just a question to ask you guys, what's the definition of an emergency savings? What do you think that is? Pardon me?
There's a variable to that. Different financial people will tell you different things, but generally 3 to 6, I've heard. Most will say 6 to 12 months of
Okay.
your income that would be available to you
Yeah.
in cash if you were to lose a job. Ideally, if you and your spouse, if you're both working, you would have then
Yeah.
6 to 12 months.
6 to 12 months. Yeah. Ideally 6 months if you can on your salary. So, gross is what? Before taxes, right? Right. So, make sure you got enough on your net. That's tough. So it's hard to do that, but it's worth it. It will happen to us. And there's no grace when that happens. You lose your house, car, your dog. You take your wife and your 3 kids, and you move into a crappy little apartment building. And I'll be honest with you, you got help from nobody. No government, no family, no church, no EBT cards, no temporary acts of relief, nothing. So, happens to us, it can happen to you. So, make sure that if you're a young family, you save your money up, put it aside, because you're not going to be getting help from anybody. I know that's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing to hear, but it does happen. So that's my advice. So do what you can. Thank you very much for listening.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Yeah. No, you can stay right there.
I was just thinking that when I was not working for, a month and a half, that if there's work to be had and you're able to do it, that you should do it to help your family and not be too proud to take less money. I worked as a nurse normally, and we were not
Yep. If you need the money, take what God brings along your way. Don't, like she said, don't be too proud and wait for the next best thing when you have the ability to just do something. Thank you. Anyone else? Yep, Kevin? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I agree. There's been times in my life too, and my life has been a lot shorter than some of yours. But God has taught me the same thing too. You don't always know where the money will come from. You don't always know where the resources will come from, but always trust Him anyway. Give Him back what is His. Try to outgive Him. It can be a lot of fun to try, but give Him what He deserves, and He's not going to leave you alone. And so we're not going to review everything that we covered in those other 8 weeks, but just to sum it up, we have people in our midst who can help one another. And you can probably help someone else with something that you've learned, and they can maybe help you. And as the body of Christ, we're not always going to be talking about money. We're not always going to be talking about the things we do during the week. The content of our conversations is so many things, but one of the beautiful things about us as a family is that we can share with one another. We can help. And whether we're quoting scripture to one another or sharing from our experiences about how to use the money that God has given us, we can be a help to one another as long as God gives us time to be with one another. And so remember that and take advantage of it. And if you have something, some experience or something that God has taught you, share it with somebody else as God gives you opportunities, especially as you see people that have needs.